I want to thank again our special guests, Cardinal Wuerl and Archbishop Vigano. They'll be with us at the picnic after Mass, and I hope you'll stop by to say hello to them. And I know you're eager to get outside for all of those festivities, but I want to take a minute to talk about a theme that we hope to highlight this academic year. This is a big week in the Church. We celebrate the feasts of St. Monica and St. Augustine and the beheading of St. John the Baptist. And being a university, we're naturally interested in St. Augustine. He was, as you know, a famous big brain, and we're still reading his stuff, the Confessions in the City of God in particular, 1,600 years later. Here's the weird thing about Augustine. He's a famous philosopher who learned a lot on his intellectual journey, but if you were to sum up his teaching in one word, like Freud, the pleasure principle, or Jung, eternal youth, it would be love. Augustine tells the story of his conversion in his Confessions, and at the beginning of the book, he writes, "Lord, you have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." It's a book about falling in love with God. The thing is, he thinks that this love is the compass of his intellectual life. He says later on in the book, "Let me come to love you wholly, and thus, O Lord, may all the useful things I learned as a boy now be offered in your service. Let it be that for your service I now speak and write and reckon." Pope Benedict XVI, as it turns out, is a big Augustine fan. He wrote his doctoral dissertation about him, and about 2 decades later he said, "Augustine has kept me company for more than 20 years. I've developed my theology in a dialogue with Augustine, though naturally I've tried to conduct this dialogue as a man of today." A friend of mine has observed that Benedict is the greatest theologian to sit in the See of Peter since Gregory the Great. And though he's a really big brain like Augustine, he too is all about love. It's the theme of his 2 best-known encyclicals, Deus Caritas Est and Caritas in Veritate. More to our purposes, it's been the central theme of his writings and speeches about Catholic higher education. In speaking to the students of St. Mary's University College, for example, on his apostolic visit to the UK in 2010, the Pope explained the relation between Catholic education and the love of God in this way. "In your Catholic schools," he said, "there's always a bigger picture over and above the individual subjects you study, the different skills you learn. All the work you do is placed in the context of growing in friendship with God and all that flows from that friendship. So you learn not just to be good students, but good people." At this point, you're probably thinking I've gone off the rails. Catholic University presidents on ceremonial occasions usually talk about faith and reason and argue that faith deserves a place at the table of higher education, but I'm talking about love and reason. Augustine and Benedict say love, not faith, is the virtue central to the Catholic idea of higher education. What's up with that? Love is mushy. It's about feelings, not thoughts. It inspires us to do what we should not, like shirk our studies or break curfews when we used to have them. But this is not how it is with the love of God. It keeps us on the right track. Here's an analogy from the movie Apollo 13, which might be a little before some of your times. Apollo 13, in case you were too young, was a spacecraft sent to the moon in 1970. And it met with an accident in space that cost the ship much of its power supply. In an attempt to save the 3 men on board, one of the astronauts, Jim Lovell, had to steer the spacecraft manually through outer space toward Earth because there wasn't enough power to operate the guidance system, and the ship had drifted off course. So in order to get back on course, Lovell aims to keep the sight of Earth, the thing in outer space that's appearing relatively fixed and that's his target, in the craft's small window while he fires the engines. In steering the course of our intellectual life, we need to keep God in the window. He's the point of the journey. He's the thing that we need to keep in view if we want to stay on course. Yogi Berra famously said, "If you don't know where you're going, when you get there, you'll be lost." Habits of virtue keep the intellectual wanderer on track, and the chief virtue, St. Paul says, is love. It's easy to see the link between our friendship with God and academic work in some fields. Our schools of music and architecture offer degrees in sacred music and sacred space. But the link is equally strong in, say, business and economics. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen has argued that welfare economics should pay more attention to ethics. We need, he says, to consider the real motivations of real people. Modern economics, by contrast, he says, has moved in the direction set by John Stuart Mill. You know the famous poem about Mill. John Stuart Mill, by a mighty effort of will, overcame his natural bonhomie and wrote principles of political economy. In business and economics, in law, in history, in psychology, in all our studies, our perspective, not just our motive, is informed by the love of God. That's why we make Mass and the sacraments so widely available. That's why we urge you to pray, to go on retreat, come to adoration, join a weekly reflection group. It's why we're blessed by the number of priests and religious on campus who study alongside you. They're examples of how to love God. It's even why this great basilica was built, to remind us who live and work here that our purpose is to love God. So as we begin our work for this academic year, I hope you'll remember that the love of God is at the heart of all we do at the Catholic University of America. God bless our efforts this year.